When Christians get money wrong, they get it really wrong.
I started giving on that level so that God would owe me. I started giving on the level where I put God in debt, and God said, I'll owe no man. I started giving on the money that I wanted to make. I started giving on a deal that hadn't closed yet, and then God had to open up the windows of heaven and pour me out a blessing because he wasn't going to be in debt to me.
Okay, stop it right there. You see what I mean? Not only is this unbiblical, it's unrealistic. That's why today I'm going to share with you the most common money mistakes that Christians make. And if you stick with me to the end, I'm going to give you 3 really practical mindsets to help you overcome those mistakes today on Church Door. Hey there, and welcome back to Church Door. I'm Ian, and I'm so glad that you're taking a little bit of your time to be with us here again today. Do me a quick favor and go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. It shoots it up in the algorithm for other people to be blessed by this content just like you today. Now, I want to remind you, we are here every single Sunday morning at 11:30 Central Standard Time. We want to walk with you. We want to pray with you. So if you have a need, you can always reach out to us in the chat box or text prayer to the number you see coming up on the screen right now. Spoken like a real OG, Eleanor Roosevelt said it best: learn from the mistakes of others. You can't live long enough to make all the mistakes yourself. There are so many instances that I wish I could have learned from the mistakes of others in my life. It would have saved me a ton of heartbreak. And maybe you are like me, a little bullheaded, and I always like to think that, my way is the best way. Well, the longer I've went down the road, the more I've realized the truth to that old cliche saying, which is, when I was a child, I thought my parents knew everything. Then as a teenager, I thought they knew nothing. Now as an adult, I realize they knew more than I gave them credit for. If there's one subject, especially as Christians, that learning from the mistakes of others is of the highest importance, I believe that subject is money.
More money, more problems.
Now, why is it so important that we get this subject right? Well, the scripture tells us this, that the love of money is the root of all evil.
$1 million.
And Jesus said it. You cannot love both God and money. Money ends marriages. It decimates friendships. It tears apart families and communities. And oh yes, it even destroys our churches. Which is super sad, especially when God has given us piles of wisdom around this very topic. That's why over the next few weeks, we're starting a new series of messages called The Rich Man's Guide to Spiritual Depravity. We'll be taking time to learn from the mistakes of the rich man that ultimately led him to his own demise. And within this great parable, Jesus was teaching us what not to do when it comes to the investment of our time, our giftings, and oh yeah, you've even guessed it, our money. So it's really your choice. Apply the parable or ignore it at your own cost. Pun absolutely intended. So let's jump right into the scriptures this morning. Luke 16, starting at verse 19. There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. The poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. And he called out, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. But Abraham said, Child, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish. Within these verses, we can see some of the biggest money mistakes that Christians could make. Now, before we jump into those mistakes, I do want to note one important thing, that the rich man was not in this predicament simply because he was rich. We cannot say that someone's financial status is sinful in and of itself and the thing that ultimately separated this rich man from God. Yet how he chose to invest his blessings and ultimately ignore God's call in his life was what led him to eternal separation from God and all of his blessings. As a matter of fact, the place this parable describes as paradise, or what is known as heaven, was Abraham's bosom. Our version of reading calls it Abraham's side. Anyone who has read the Old Testament knows Abraham was a wealthy man. He was blessed by God in every way. So you can imagine the rich man's astonishment. In the afterlife, he received an unexpected surprise, separation from the place he thought he would be, only to see Lazarus, the one who was financially poor, embraced in the arms of the most blessed man of God, who was Abraham. So what is it that we can learn from the rich man? Well, here's the first thing. The first biggest money mistake that a Christian can make is excessiveness and wasteful living. These scriptures paint a lavish picture for the life of the rich man. In modern terms, this would have been him being dripped out in the hottest, most expensive fashion like Gucci, Louis, or Balenciaga. He would have been looking absolutely sleek. This picture is made very clear because of his purple clothing and fine linen. Now, there are some other not so obvious clues that also show of his excessive wastefulness. The scripture also says that he feasted sumptuously every day. To put this into perspective, it would have been like the party that the father and the prodigal son story would have had. But that was not just one time, it was every single day. When I lived in Tennessee, we called this eating high on the hog. So it was no wonder that Lazarus sat at the rich man's gate. He wanted the leftovers. It was a party feast every day. Yet somehow, not even the perfectly good scraps made their way down to Lazarus. Now, you might already begin to let yourself off the hook, but friends, listen, let's not be too quick to let ourselves off that easy. When the true fact is that in the world we live, 811 million people around this world every single night go to bed hungry. And then in America, we waste approximately 133 billion pounds worth of food each year. That's nearly 30 to 40% of our entire food supply. Now that stings, or at least it should. Well-known author K.P. Yohannan said this about coming from poverty in India to America. When I came to America, I saw a nation that was materially rich, but spiritually poor. People had everything they needed, but they lacked the peace and joy that comes from knowing God. I guess the verse, "What profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his very soul," is very clearly in view within this context. So here's the second biggest money mistake that a Christian could make. It is being tight-handed. In the second half of these scriptures, we see Lazarus is called upon by the rich man to dip his finger in water to cool his tongue because he was in anguish because of the flame. And this tells us two things about the tight-handedness of a rich man. First, the rich man knew Lazarus enough to actually call him by name. He knew this man by name and still left him in poverty outside the gate of his lavish home. And second, he would step over this man every time he went out of the compound, and he still did nothing. And even in the afterlife, the rich man treats Lazarus as a lesser person. So Abraham called him out. He set the record straight by saying to the rich man, "Remember? Think about it. You received your blessings in life, and Lazarus had nothing. In other words, you were given much, yet you did nothing with your blessing, but keep it to yourself." So what is the results of tight-handedness? Choosing possessions over people? It's eternal separation from all that is good. Now, I'm a practical guy, and as much as you say, well, then all we need to do is not be excessive, wasteful, or tight-handed with our money. But let's be honest, it's never that simple. So what is the remedy? How do we battle back against our tendency to be mastered by money, like the rich man in this parable? Well, I want to give you 3 common Christian mindsets to be the master of your money, not vice versa. Mindset number 1, our money is ultimately God's money. Jesus made this clear through another parable in Matthew chapter 25. That parable tells us about a master who leaves his servants to oversee his possessions while he's away. So in short, these are 3 servants entrusted to invest his resources. 2 of them do well and 1 does not. So when the master settles his accounts with his servants, the one that did not invest the master's resources was cast out, just like the rich man in the above illustration. So what is that parable saying? All the blessings that we receive are from God. Therefore, we should invest them as such. And I don't know about you, but it's a huge mindset shift when I think about the resources I received as something God has given me to steward, rather than something I have earned and I deserve. Therefore, I should enjoy the fruits of my labor.
Clothes.
Treat yourself.
Fragrances.
Treat yourself.
Massages.
Treat yourself.
It's a big mindset shift. The second mindset is this: kingdom concerns over individual concerns. Shortly after Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, we see something amazing happen. The scriptures say that all who believed were together and had all things in common. They were selling their possessions, their belongings, and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. Now, most Christians look to this moment in history as being the purest expression of what Christians should aspire to be. And it was obvious at this moment that individual concerns became irrelevant as Christians cared for the needs of others first, rather than simply satisfying their own needs. And the final mindset is this: we are radically generous because Christ was radically generous to us. Nothing is more deeply embedded within the Christian worldview than the idea of generosity, right? Greater love has no one than someone who lays down his life for his friends. That is radical generosity. It's sacrificial. Therefore, regarding our resources, our money, our treasures, how we handle them is always in honor of that very radical generosity that Jesus modeled for us. So my challenge to you today is to step into these mindsets. How you ask? Cheerfully and abundantly. Paul reminds the church in Corinth that they should support the work of the church through their cheerful hearts, not reluctantly because they think they have to do it, but because they know it returns good for God's work in the world. Likewise, Jesus reminds us to hold an attitude of overflowing abundance to others. In Luke 6, he says, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." So my encouragement to you is to cheerfully and abundantly step into these mindsets and just see what God can do with your treasures. He'll do more than you could ever imagine, not only for you, but for the people around you. If you're here today and you need somebody to talk to, somebody to pray with you, maybe you're having a hard time with your finances and you just want to live it out in a godly way, reach out to us. We're in the chat box, or you can text prayer to the number you see coming up on the screen. Do me a quick favor, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so that every time we put out a piece of content, it's going to come directly to you. Or you can join us on our mission by being radically generous and going to rivervalleyrockford.org/give and making a donation there. That donation goes to help people just like you take their next step with Jesus. Hey, thanks again for coming to be with us here once again today. Our prayer for you is that you would go and you would walk in God's blessing, and that He would show just how good He is in every single way when we trust Him with our money and our treasures. We look forward to seeing you again here this next week. Have a great week.